This edition of MacVoices is supported by Text Expander by Smile, the makers of world-class software. Visit textexpander.com/podcast to learn more and download your free demo. Welcome to MacVoices. This is the talk of the Apple community, and I'm Chuck Joyner. Folks, today we get to talk to a Take Control author about a book that has been revised yet again. It's one of my favorite topics to talk to Michael E. Cohen about, and that's Take Control of Pages. Michael, great to see you in spite of, everything that seems to be going on right now.
Certainly. It's good to see you. Luckily, it's a slow news week.
Yeah. Oh, nothing's going on. Yeah. Yeah. CES and all that other stuff too. Yeah, it's nothing happening here as we record this now. Really,
it was just hard to even wake up for this interview. But, my fans, I do what I can.
Exactly.
So yes, we're talking about the third edition of Take Control of Pages. And it's been a very interesting journey.
Well, I know I think this is one of your favorite books to revise because you've done it so many times. Either that or it's just there are that many changes.
It has been through enormous changes in the about 8 years since I started this. And in fact, the book has been completely revised and refocused, which is the first time since it was written. Let me explain.
Yeah, the refocused has me intrigued. What do you mean by refocused?
Well, the big song and dance about Pages when Apple ripped it out of the App Store and then replaced it with an entirely new Pages back in 2013 with an entirely new interface, new file structure, everything, and completely set, the Pages using world on its ear because it lost a lot of features. It didn't look at all the same. It broke everybody's Apple script, so on and so on and so forth. But Apple had really good reasons for doing that because up until then, Pages had been written for the Mac. And then they kind of had a knockoff version that ran on their iPad and iPhone. And the files were kind of compatible, but not really compatible. And you change something on the iPhone and suddenly back on the Mac, the file's completely blown out. So what Apple did was build a common editing engine that worked on all of their devices to make the files completely transportable from phone to iPad to Mac and even to a web browser, and all through iCloud, because Apple was now selling iCloud as a storage medium, and that would make it just a lovely sales feature. But in order to do that, they had to completely rewrite Pages, and in doing so, they completely redesigned the user interface. So we had a brand new Pages that had to be explained, and had to be explained on the iPhone, the iPad, the web browser, and the Mac, all at the same time if you really wanted to take control of it. And so that's what we decided to Take Control books. We'd try to cover Pages on every platform it ran on. But that would be a huge undertaking. And so the book came out in installments. And in order to make the first installment worth getting, I front-loaded a lot of basic editing stuff in the first installment in a humongous chapter called Where Is Everything? Because, the first thing you say to yourself when you go to a new word processor, if you know word processing, but you don't know the one you're working on, the first thing you do is, well, where the heck are the fonts? Where the heck do I assign paragraph styles? Where is this? Where is that? Where is that other thing? And so the first big chapter in the Pages installment version was Where Is Everything? To let you answer that question. And then in the subsequent installments, I went into more detail in things like how you manage styles, how lists work, how graphics work in a big way, and the various models for them, and so on. And eventually it became a complete book, and it was sold in one piece. That was fine. At the same time, Apple, bless their hearts, was revising Pages at a furious rate. And that's because it had lost a lot of features, and users were rightly furious. And Apple was also doing it because Pages was a sales mechanism for them on two fronts. First, it was free to the user, and with Pages and Numbers and Keynote all being free, it made the Mac a value-added proposition. You get not only the computer, but this whole Office suite as well. And the same if you bought an iPad, you would get these things as well. But it really wouldn't work if it didn't have enough capability, if it was just a toy word processor. So Apple had to bring it up to like first-rate capability quickly. So there were a lot of changes going on over the first year. So they were revising it all the time, which meant I was revising the book all the time. And eventually we got to the point of doing a second edition, but they were still revising quickly. So I kept the structure I'd had all along and just kept dealing with new stuff. That was fine. But Apple's made another move again recently, which bears on this whole story, and that is the iPad and the iPhone are no longer the same operating system. They kind of are, but they kind of aren't. They're now going in two different directions. Also, looking at how people were using Pages, I'd say most people, if they're doing word processing or page layout, are doing it on a big enough screen to make it worthwhile, which means a Mac or maybe an iPad Pro. So those are the two sweet spots for Pages as a regular tool in regular use. Still works in a web browser, which is great because you can use it for collaboration or checking on something you've written before that you need to do quickly and you're not at your home machine. And on the phone for the same reason, you can make quick changes and like that. But those aren't the primary platforms for using Pages if you want to do something deep and big. A big project, you're going to want to be on a screen, a system that can handle it. And so iPad and the Mac were the ways to go. And iPad and iPhone had diverged with the emergence of iPadOS, which does things in a different way slightly than the iPhone, and even more so now that you've got multitasking added to the iPad, where you can have more than one app open at a time with split view or slide overviews. That in mind, we decided to do a third edition of Pages because Pages had kept incrementing and incrementing and incrementing, and now we're suddenly at Pages 10. The one that came out that replaced everything you had before was Pages 5. So it had gone through a lot of changes really fast until we got to version 10. So we figured this would be a good time to do a new edition. And Joe had been begging me, our publisher Joe had been begging me to make that Where Is Everything chapter a little smaller and reorganize the book and break things out. And I completely agreed. So I decided to bite the bullet and completely reorganize the book and focus primarily on the Mac and the iPad. Not dropping the iPhone, not dropping the web stuff, but really kind of, not focusing on it too much, just to mention them when it seemed relevant to. But to really focus on how you, set a style on the Mac, how you do it on an iPad, how you move a graphic on the Mac, how you do it on an iPad. And covering 2 instead of 4 platforms made it a lot easier to revise this book, I have to tell you. Because, your head could go a little bit crazy. Well, it works like this on the phone, but it works like this on the browser, and it works like this on the iPad, and it works like that on the Mac. And they work 4 different ways. Your head explodes. You can never really follow what the program can do for you. So that had to be done. Anyway, that's the refocusing in a nutshell, Chuck.
Okay, well that's interesting because I guess I confess I tend to use Pages on my Mac and not as much on the other platforms. So I don't think I realized that there were that many differences. I mean, aside from the obvious interface differences, that there were that many different ways to do, well, to use your example, styles. Because my impression has always been that one of the benefits of Apple doing that revision that you talked about with Pages 5 moving forward was that it was a back-end engine that was all the same, and that as much as possible would be similar or the same. Again, given the interface differences.
The user experience on an iPad is very different than it is on a Mac. You've got an entirely different connection between what's going on the screen. And because it's a touch interface, things have to be put in different places to make it easy to get to them. So where you've got like the format inspector hanging it on the side of your Pages window on the Mac, you don't have room for that on an iPad. And what's more, you've got popovers and lovely other things. And since your hand is all over the screen all the time, you can't see everything at once. So you design things differently for the iPad. You give the same functionality, but how you get to it can be a very different path. Because you don't have a format inspector hanging in a sidebar. You have to tap the format icon at the top of the iPad screen and then navigate through successive popovers to get to various settings. But they're all there and they all do the same thing. But how you do something varies remarkably. So you need to describe to a user, well, if you want to create a new style on an iPad, you do it this way. If you want to create a new style on the Mac, you do it that way. Doesn't really matter because when you move the document from one to another, the style will be in both places. It's just how you make them is different.
This is probably unfair, but because you just finished saying that this book doesn't cover the phone or the cloud or iCloud as much, but
it covers iCloud in the sense that that's how you hand files around to yourself as well. So
right, but can I still edit my files in iCloud
yes.
if I don't have another device or whatever?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
And in fact, the nice thing is, if you understand how Pages works on the Mac, you already kind of understand how it looks in a web browser as you're accessing it via iCloud, because the interfaces look and act much the same. Not exactly the same, because a web browser is not the Mac, it's got its limitations. But it will look familiar enough for you to find your way around. It actually does have an inspector sidebar, for example. So, it feels a lot like the same. Similarly, if you know it on the iPad, it looks a lot the same as on an iPhone. There are minor differences because the iPhone screen is really smaller, so it can't do some things all on one screen because you just don't have the room for it. And so certain features end up in even different places. But generally, if you know the iPad, you know the phone. If you know the Mac, you kind of know the web browser.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense because of the similar OSs. Yeah. And I guess we've joked about this before as you've talked about the previous revisions on the show, that Apple has constantly been revising this, but I find this is a good thing.
Because, it's excellent. It's an excellent thing.
Yeah, I mean we've talked for so long about Apple playing the long game, and doing some of these things not because they were a good idea then, but because they would be a good idea, in a year, 2 years, 3 years. In this case, what, 5, 7, something,
6 or 7.
Yeah, and so this is really encouraging because too often we talk about the things that the ball seems to have dropped, and Pages is clearly not one of them. So Pages is clearly important to Apple.
It's important in several ways. Again, as I said before, it really helps sell their platforms. If you can buy a Mac and you also get a great Office suite, just thrown in, Bamboo Steamer too. It's a wonderful thing. It helps sell the product. If it's a good product and it's credible enough to actually use and isn't a toy. And so Apple's been really good about making it a credible product. They have a second reason for doing it so as well, and that's because they have a different audience they're trying to appeal to. They're developers. There are a lot of Apple developers. There are tons of Apple developers out there developing for the Mac, developing for the iPad, developing for the iPhone. And Apple wants them to adopt their new technologies when they work on their products. Apple uses things like Pages to demonstrate their latest widgets, their latest techniques, their latest ways of doing things as a proof in concept to their developer audience. You want to add this new feature to your product? Well, here's how we do it in Pages. Here's how we do it in Keynote. They give you examples. So Pages is really good for explaining how stuff works to the developers, how it should look, how it should act. It's not just a book that says, here's what you need to consider when you put, your application out there. They want to be able to point at examples like this, like that. And so Pages really appeals to that developer audience, and it may seem not important to the rest of us, but without the developers, nothing gets put on the Mac or the iPad. And without developers who know how to do things, their stuff doesn't look as good and act as well, interact with other products as well. So Apple has a real vested interest in using Pages as a way of demonstrating their latest technology. And they can't demonstrate it again if it's just a toy. It has to really be able to work and do what it's meant to do, to convince people to adopt, to convince developers to adopt these techniques, these new features.
I'm really glad we had this part of the discussion because I've never really thought about it exactly that way. I mean, it seems like it should be so obvious, and yet until somebody points it out, Keynote, Numbers, Pages, Final Cut, GarageBand, iMovie, these are all, I think I got them all. These are all showcases for Apple technologies.
As much as anything else, yeah.
But most of us tend to think of them just as, what does it do for me?
Exactly. And you really don't need to think about a corporation strategy so much as long as the product works for you. But that's not what I'm paid to do.
Right.
I'm paid to look at that sort of thing. Also, I've been watching this since the beginning. And in fact, I cover this in the new introduction to the book about how word processing and the Mac have had an interesting relationship over the years. It started with the very free MacWrite. Then it became a for sale product with MacWrite Pro where Apple sold it. Then they gave it away free again. Then they sold it again. They've always had this interesting, is it for sale or is it something we use to demonstrate our technology? And with Pages 5 and the iCloud-enabled Pages, Apple finally said, that's our strategy. This is a loss leader and a demonstration project and something we can all use as well. Don't forget, Keynote was partly written because Steve Jobs wanted a good presentation product to show at Macworlds because he didn't like using PowerPoint to show all those nifty slides about what Apple was doing. So it's partly the old eat your own dog food story,
Oh, I remember sitting in Macworld keynotes and watching Steve do the presentations, and then all of a sudden you'd see a transition or an effect or something that you didn't have access to, but it was just up there, so it's coming, and it's like I want that. I want that right now.
Yeah, pretty smart guy, that Jobs. Had quite a career in front of him, didn't he?
Yeah, to say the least. This edition of MacVoices is supported by Smile, the makers of world-class software like TextExpander. There is no one who uses a Mac, iPhone, or iPad that doesn't repeatedly enter the same text over and over of one kind or another. Not only is it boring, but it also wastes time and is prone to mistakes. TextExpander from Smile solves that problem so that you aren't bored, are more productive, and are always accurate. Just a few keystrokes can expand to those things that we all type over and over: our email address, our mailing address, our phone numbers, or something more elaborate: a designated response to a customer inquiry, directions to home or office, or a standard clause in a business contract. Even better, you can share your snippets. That's TextExpander speak for those short abbreviations you create that expand into characters, words, or paragraphs, across devices and also across platforms, since there are also versions of TextExpander for virtually any platform you use. If there's only one new utility that you adopt and learn this year, it needs to be TextExpander. It will give you both immediate and long-term returns on your investment. Up your productivity game with my most frequently used utility, TextExpander from Smile, the makers of world-class software, at textexpander.com/podcast. That's textexpander.com/podcast. Thanks to Smile for being the longest-running sponsor of MacVoices. Well, so other than the refocusing of the book, thank you for, again, explaining that, because it makes a huge amount of sense as both the book and Pages have evolved. What revisions, though, to the program have we seen since the last revision or the last update?
A number. They're not like earth-shattering anymore because, it's been a solid product for a while. In fact, it's a very solid product. If I were a student at school, this is what I'd be using to write my papers. If I didn't work for a company that asked me to use Microsoft Word, as the in-house tool, I'd use Pages because it's just prettier and can do just about the same thing and make you feel nicer about it. Anyway, but there have been changes. For example, drop caps. That's not something everybody needs. The capital at the beginning of a paragraph that's big and drops down and text kind of wraps around it. That's a hard thing to do typographically in a lot of word processors. There's a very easy way to do it now in Pages. Again, on the Mac and on the iPad, it's a piece of cake to do a very attractive drop cap. Why is that important? Well, for things like ebooks, Pages now has a lot of ebook templates. If you're going to be writing a novel and you want to do an ebook of it, Pages is a good place to pour your text into and format it because it does a really great job of making ebooks now that you can sell commercially. And if you want to have the graphical niceties that a professionally published book has, you want things like drop caps. So that's an easy thing. There have been things like you can add background colors to the entire document now. God, I wrote up a list of these things for Joe just yesterday, and I'm now forgetting what they all are. I may need to open up a file and take a look. There's a handwriting recognition has become a thing on the iPad with the pencil. And there's now a scribble mode where instead of typing your text in or dictating it to Siri, you can now scribble on the screen and it turns it into text, just like the Newton used to do. And that's a new feature that you haven't had before in Pages at all. And you still can't do it on the Mac, but you can do it on the iPad. So that's one place where the iPad wins. I talked about multitasking on the iPad. And for the first time in this version of the Pages book, I talk about what that means in terms of working on several documents at the same time. And I have a whole little section about, one screen, 2 windows or more. We explain that while you don't have the same choices of windows all over the place that you do on a Mac, you're not limited to the single document on your screen anymore on an iPad. So those are some of the big changes to talk about. There's a new reading-only mode, which kicks in by default when you're opening a Pages document that you've stored in iCloud. So you don't open something and accidentally mess it up. It defaults to being reading only. So you can read through it, but you can't change the text accidentally. You just click a little button in the upper right-hand corner, put it into normal editing mode, and you're done. And from that point on, it stays that way. But when you first open a document from the cloud, it's in reading mode, which is, again, a good thing, especially if you're sharing iCloud folders with a colleague and you want them to look at a document you've written, but you don't want them to mess it up. Well, you could lock it down, but then it's locked down for you too. But if you kind of trust the person, but you don't want them to accidentally mess it up, you don't need to worry about that anymore. It's kind of built in. Again, shared folders is another big thing because it used to be if you wanted to collaborate with somebody on a Pages document, it was a onesie-twosie sort of thing. You had to send an invitation for each document you wanted to share. But let's say you're working with someone on a big project that requires multiple Pages files. You can create a folder on your iCloud account and share that whole folder with that person, and all the Pages documents in that folder are also shared with them automatically. So that's one of the other new features. Like I said, the core of Pages is so sound at this point that a lot of the good stuff is at the edges to satisfy the edge case users and make it more compelling to even more people. Minor things, they've kind of unified how captions and titles work. As you know, Pages is not just a word processor, it's a page layout program. But that means you can do things like throw images on the page and you want to put a caption on it or a title on it. And now they've unified how captions and titles work on all the objects inside of Pages. You don't have to go searching anymore through the formatting inspector to find where it is and what it's called for this type of thing. And it works the same on Pages as it does in Keynote, as it does in Numbers. And again, it's all the good things to show you. It's to show users, how you can have a commonality of things that you don't have to learn everything all over again when you move from one to another. So that's one of the other things. I'm sure more will pop up into my head when we keep talking.
Oh, sure. I want to sort of go to where you just were and then go back farther, because together, because forgive me, this is a little therapy time for Chuck, but I get crazy with people who try to use Word as the answer to everything.
Right.
And it is a word processor. It's a fine word processor. It is an extremely powerful word processor,
Oh gosh, yes.
but it is not a page layout program.
Nope.
And as soon as you start trying to do page layout things in a word processor, you A, fail miserably, and B, look like a complete bozo. And that's one thing I love about Pages. I can use it as a word processor, excuse me, if I want, but I also have all those page layout capabilities that if my project suddenly goes another direction, or I just want to take it another direction, I can do it.
Or, and this is not an edge case for people in that sort of environment, you can use what's in one document that is a word processing document and move stuff into a separate document that's a page layout document, so you can have both a flowing text and maybe a brochure that accompanies it as well. You can repurpose stuff very easily that way because they're all compatible.
So what, for the folks who haven't used Pages or are just digging in, I mean, what's the difference between a word processing document and a page layout document? Well, it's obvious from a capability standpoint, but how do I know which one I'm in, and how do I decide that, okay, this one's going to be one, this one's going to be the other?
Well, there's a lot of different answers to that question. One answer is that there's a simple little checkbox on the Mac. I think it's in a different place on the iPad, but it's a single checkbox, which you'll find in the inspector, which simply says body text. For most word processing documents, you type and type and type and type and type. You get to the bottom of the page and poof, there's a new page. You keep typing. And the text just flows from one page to the next. That's a word processor. In a page layout program, you create a box and say, text goes in this box. And when you get to the end of that box, there's nowhere for the text to go unless you choose to direct it into a different box yourself. So you lay out where the text appears on each page and the other stuff. So one is, the page is a canvas on which you stick things. In a word processing document, the page is a canvas that contains within it a flowing text that goes from page to page to page, and that's inviolate no matter how many pages you've got. It just flows. And most people doing word processors want that, because when I start to write a letter, to my favorite people, I may not think that it's going to be 2 pages, but it might be. It might be 4. I don't want to have to lay it out at the beginning to say, well, the text goes here and then here and then here. I just want to keep writing and have the text flow. That's what we all want when we're writing anything that's long. A report, a letter, a novel, a screenplay, a hostage demand list. Oh,
okay. Can I change from one to the other? If I have document A and it's one thing.
There's like I said, it's a little checkbox. You check it and Pages will say, oh, wait a minute, if you do that, this will happen and that will happen. You sure you want to do that? You may not want to save a copy first, but you can do it with one click.
Okay.
And the other answer is that there's some templates that are designed for page layout and some that are designed for word processing. For example, if you go to the template chooser in Pages and you look at they've got templates for flyers, right? For putting on the telephone pole saying, have you seen my cat Muffins? She disappeared mysteriously 4 weeks ago. The flyer templates are page layout documents. Some of the ebook templates are page layout documents as well, because some ebooks are graphic intensive and you don't want text flowing from page to page. You want to lay it out as an art book or a photography book or even a cookbook where you're not flowing a lot of text. Most stuff stays on a single page. So those templates are designed as page layout documents, making it easy to do those sorts of ebooks. Other ebook templates are designed for people who want to flow a novel or a history or a biography into a book, and they're not so concerned about where the page breaks fall because it's an ebook and you just turn from page to page.
Okay.
So it's available in the template chooser. It's available in the inspector. It's available in a lot of places. There's a menu command for it too.
Well, and I mean, this is all a good thing. You know, I know, I'm sure that people are going to say, well, gee, I really don't need one or I really don't need the other, and so I don't want to learn. But having that flexibility and that power, it may add that much to the learning curve, but it adds this much to, you know, the ability to be creative or to have it address whatever it is you want to do. Again, unlike Word or some of the others.
One of the nice things about the Pages interface is stuff you don't need doesn't push itself in your face. If you just, start off with a blank document template, which is, kind of the default, that's the one that gets highlighted first when you open up the template chooser. That's just a, plain simple word processing document like every one you've ever seen in your entire life using word processors. You don't have to learn anything new for that other than, well, where do I find the fonts and the paragraph settings? But aside from that, it's a word processor, you know it. And you don't have to learn how page layout works. But if you want to, the path to learning it is very simple. But it's not in your face until you need it to be in your face. The interface is in fact context sensitive generally. As I said, you've got this format inspector sidebar hanging on the side of the screen on the Mac. It changes depending upon what you're working on in your document. If you're typing a paragraph, you see all sorts of commands about controlling pages in the format inspector. You click an image that you put in the middle of your text. Suddenly, all the commands on the format inspector have nothing to do with text and everything to do with laying that image out and adjusting it. You don't have to look for those tools. You click to select it in your document. The tools are there.
And the fact that they are there means that sooner or later you're going to pick one up and decide to try it and see what it does. Right. And that's,
or for a small investment of the cost of an ebook, you could take control of the pages, which is now in its 3rd edition.
Nice plug. But I mean, it's time to wrap it up and point that out, that this is a powerful program. You can use it in a very simplistic fashion if you wish, and it'll be fine. But if you really want to tap all that power or dance your documents between the iPhone, the iPad, the cloud and all, I mean, you need somebody to walk you through some of this, especially with the interface differences that you described.
And there's other things as well. I talked briefly about collaboration. I come out of an academic environment. I worked at UCLA for many years. I've supported instructors who use computers to teach, especially writing instructors. And there's things like tracking changes, which are very, very useful for people like teachers. Student turns in a paper. You take this paper. You make your changes with track changes on to say, this is what you should have done. This is what you could do. You can add comments. They can see the original. They can see the changes very quickly. You can do the same thing when you collaborate in real time with iCloud, where 2 people can be working on the same document at once, and you see what they're typing while you're typing somewhere else in the same document. And that's just incredible.
Well, and in the business world too, I know that was a big knock against Pages for a long time, that it didn't have change tracking. Because you're revising a contract or whatever. Well, I put my wording in, and then you send it over to you. You put your wording in, and who gets the last edit? And with change tracking,
tracking is great. And one of the things I like about Pages is it looks pretty in Pages. The change tracking user interface is actually graphically stunning. It's not in your face, but you look at it and it's pretty, and it's not as forbidding as the straight lines and boxes that you see in some other programs. This kind of has nicely curved lines that kind of move around as you move through the document. It's quite impressive graphically. And that's the thing I generally like about Pages. It's pretty to look at while you're working with it. And there's a little something to be said for that.
Well, I think there's a big something to be said for that. I mean, that's what Apple built its reputation on. Those little niceties. And it still fascinates me that so many other programs don't copy that, or at least attempt to copy it. They just seem to be content with, like you say, the boxes and the ugliness and the aesthetics. I mean, do you need the aesthetics? No, but I think if you're using a tool for a long time, you suddenly start to appreciate some of the aesthetics.
Yeah. Style does matter. It may not be the only thing, but it's important. It's definitely important.
And in the cases we're talking about, it's not a style at the expense of
Right.
usability. It's in fact
Right.
more usability because of the style.
In many ways, that's exactly so. If something's attractive on the screen, you actually may want to look at it and say, well, I wonder what this thing does. It's so interesting.
Exactly. I think well, not that anybody's really shopping or anything, but you go out and you look at whatever you're trying to look for, and you can see basic ugly versions or you can see attractive ones. I mean, sometimes it's just the color of something somebody will go and say, I mean, I've seen people buy like mixers for the kitchen because they're a certain color.
Yeah.
They know nothing about the mixer or whether it's a good mixer or not. It's just the color appeals to them.
By the way, speaking of colors, Apple has added color to their product line in a very interesting way. In Big Sur, as has been true on the iPad for a while, different applications have their own kind of theme color. Pages is orange, Numbers is green, Keynote is blue. And now in Big Sur, if you have your user interface set up in system preferences, those colors come through. So, the menu items show up in orange in Pages, the same ones show up in green in Numbers. So it sounds like a silly thing, but if you have a Pages document open with a spreadsheet table in it, which you can do in Pages because Pages supports tables, and you have a Numbers document from whence you may have copied that table, you can very quickly tell which window you're looking at because the Numbers window will have all their highlights in green, and the Pages will all be in highlights in orange. You go, oh, that's Pages, that's Numbers. It's not an important thing, but now that you have these theme colors, Apple shows you, A, how they work, and B, how you implement them for the developers out there who are moving to Big Sur and want to adopt the latest Apple technologies, which now includes accent colors for applications. Here's how you do it, folks. And so that's what they've done with their iWork suite across the board. So their iPad Pages looks, chromatically at least, in sync with Pages on the Mac. Numbers on the iPad chromatically is in sync with how Numbers looks on the Mac. And so you know that they're all the same product family. There's very subtle messaging going on that's not in words.
Subtle is the word, but those visual cues mean everything.
Mm-hmm.
No, that's great.
So of course, I had to reshoot so many screenshots.
Well, yeah.
Because of Big Sur. Damn you, Apple. No, that was like 2 weeks before this revision was done. Big Sur came in. I said, I've got 200 figures. I've got to reshoot all of
them. Well, you're on lockdown. You didn't have anything else to do. So
that is true.
That entertained you for an afternoon or two or three or four.
Oh, yes, it did. It was just all fun and games.
Well, so the Take Control of Pages, the newest edition, is out now at takecontrolbooks.com. Michael, is this considered an upgrade to previous ones, or is this a brand new edition and therefore a new purchase?
This is a brand new edition. If you bought Take Control of Pages within like the previous 90 days, the second edition, you get a free update. If you bought Take Control of Pages in any edition at all, you get a half price update. Or you can buy it at the full price of $14.99. $7.50 if you're a longtime Pages user but haven't updated recently. Free if you just bought the book and you need to get the update.
And it seems like I say this every time we talk to a Take Control author, but that is a ridiculously small price for the hours that go into this, the care that goes into it, and the knowledge that you will gain from it. Whether you're sitting down to read it and learn it for the first time or use it as a reference to up your game a little bit because you've been using Pages for a while and aren't taking control, aren't taking advantage of some of these new features. So,
well, the nice thing about having the book is even if I don't remember everything that's in it, when I'm using Pages and I say, I know it can do this, and I know where to look it up now because I wrote it.
Yeah.
So I use the book as well because I can't keep the whole program in my head for weeks or months at a time unless I'm writing about it and have to explain things.
Sure.
So it's nice to have a reference.
That's another one of those subtle points. I know a number of programs that I'm using every day, and I know them because I'm using them every day. And then there are others that I might use once, twice, 3 times a year for a particular project. And I know it can do it. I just got to go figure out again how to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And so having that reference book, and especially a take control reference book, is usually helpful. So
funny thing about this revision, the whole idea of cutting out the iPhone and the web stuff a lot is the hope that it would be a smaller book. But after adding in all the stuff that Pages can now do, the book turned out to be almost exactly the same length. I think there's maybe a page difference, if that, between the last second edition version and the new third edition.
Yeah.
Lots of new material, all in the same package, all in the same size package.
Sure. Well, but again, this takes us full circle right back around to the revisions Apple's done. They're continuing to improve it and make it useful for more people. So, we'll be back here again to talk about the next revision of Pages.
Let's hope it's not for at least 8 or 10 months, because it's a big book to revise.
Yeah. Michael, thank you so much for the time. This is always a lot of fun, and I always feel like I come away learning not just about the program, but different things. This time I learned to appreciate the fact that this is all a showcase for Apple's technology for audiences that aren't necessarily you or me.
Yep.
Interesting. I hope to see you a whole lot back here in 2021 as you write more books and do more things.
I look forward to every time I get a chance to talk to you. So yes, I hope so too. But I would like to occasionally go to a movie again.
Yeah, well, wouldn't we all? Wouldn't we all? Yeah.
Someday.
Well, just stay safe and get to writing, and you'll be back here before you know it.
Sure thing. You stay safe too, Chuck.
Folks, I'm Chuck Joyner. This is MacVoices. We certainly hope you are staying safe, and there's no better way to stay safe. Watch this plug, folks. Stay safe than to take control of Pages, sit down, learn it, absorb it, find out what Pages can do for you. Until the next time, and as always, thanks for watching. Visit MacVoices.com for show notes and to connect with Chuck on social media. Get involved in our Facebook group or like our Facebook page, and get more out of your Apple tech with MacVoices Magazine, free on Flipboard and on the web. And if you find value in it all, consider supporting us through either our Patreon campaign at patreon.com/MacVoices or by making a one-time donation via the PayPal link on our front page and in the show notes of each episode. You will join these fine people who help bring you MacVoices. Advertising handled by Backbeat Media at backbeatmedia.com. Bandwidth provided by CacheFly at cachefly.com.